The week of Thanksgiving was supposed to bring peace to Los Angeles, but the bold and the beautiful unfolded instead with an undercurrent of tension, secrets, and long-suppressed emotions clawing their way to the surface. Beneath the polished surfaces of Forrester Creations and the glittering lights of Il Giardino, hearts wrestled with guilt, ambition, and longing. Each character moved as if caught in an invisible web spun from old choices and fragile dreams, and every gesture, every glance, carried more meaning than the words spoken aloud. The confirmation of Luna Nozawa's death cast a shadow across the city, like a chill wind sweeping through the corridors of power and glamour. Deputy Chief Bradley Baker's announcement shattered the uneasy quiet that had hung over Forrester Creations. Luna's story, once confined to whispered gossip and private heartbreak, burst into the open and became fuel for relentless public speculation. Social media lit up with half-truths and theories. Photos, headlines, and carefully edited clips circulated online, twisting her memory into something sensational and cruel. In the glare of that scrutiny, Forrester Creations, the very brand built on beauty and illusion, found itself dragged into the mud. Every design, every statement, even the most innocent gesture, was dissected for hidden meaning. The company that had thrived on admiration now faced an avalanche of unwanted attention, and for those who loved Luna, it felt like losing her all over again. Katie Logan Spencer felt the pressure most acutely. The woman who had weathered betrayals, heart attacks, and heartbreak was now the reluctant guardian of a legacy under siege. As head of public relations, she had been the voice that soothed storms, the steady hand behind the image of grace. But this time the scandal struck too close. Luna had once worked under her, and the tragedy that followed was tangled with her own family by blood and circumstance. It was impossible to issue polished statements when the grief still burned raw behind her calm facade. When she stood before the mirror in her office, the reflection that stared back seemed older, burdened by questions that had no easy answers. How much responsibility did she bear for the young woman's suffering, and could she still protect the family she loved from the fallout of their own choices? Brooke Logan Forrester, her sister and eternal counterpart, knew the signs of exhaustion well. The two women had spent decades alternating between rivalry and devotion, and Brooke sensed the moment when Katie began to lose her balance. When Brooke announced that someone else had been appointed interim head of public relations, it was both an act of mercy and a quiet assertion of control. She urged Katie to step back, to heal, to spend time with Will, and to remember that family mattered more than damage control. Yet beneath her gentle tone lingered the faint echo of condescension that had always defined their sisterhood, a reminder that Brooke would forever see herself as the one who rescued others, even when her own house smoldered in silence. Katie's pride stung, but part of her also understood. She had been too close to the fire. Luna's pregnancy, the whispers about paternity, the desperate search that had led Katie to the beach that night, all of it had eroded the professional distance she tried to maintain. The image of the waves, the headlights, the sudden impact of metal and bone, replayed in her mind like a cruel refrain. She was the grandmother of the child Luna had carried, and though she had survived that night, something inside her had not. She buried the memory under layers of resolve, but even her best smiles couldn't hide the tremor that lingered when she faced the press. Into this fragile moment stepped Dylan, the former art teacher who had once inspired Hayes Finnegan and who now arrived at Forrester Creations with a new look and an unspoken purpose. Her poise, her quiet intelligence, and the faint mystery of her past made her stand out instantly. Officially, she was there to assist the communications team, but her timing suggested otherwise. Dylan had once been caught in the same web that claimed Luna, taken hostage during the chaos of last summer, her name briefly flickering across headlines before disappearing again. To the world, she was a survivor, but those who looked closer sensed something deeper, a hunger to understand, perhaps even to atone. She wasn't family, but she was uncomfortably close to the pain that haunted them all. The rumors said she had inside information about the night Luna died. Some whispered that she possessed the missing link in the tangled chain connecting Electra Forrester, Remy Price, and the deepfake scandal that had humiliated the fashion house months earlier. Dylan kept her silence, watching, listening, piecing together fragments that others overlooked. When cryptic messages began arriving on the phones of Katie and Electra, messages filled with half-erased photos, coordinates, and warnings that made no sense, it was Dylan who recognized their pattern. They weren't threats but confessions, breadcrumbs from someone desperate to be heard. Electra, ever the visionary designer with an ego to match, dismissed them at first. But the tone of the messages grew darker, and soon her confidence faltered. Dylan confronted her one afternoon in the design studio, sunlight glinting off bolts of silk while the hum of the sewing machines faded into tense silence. What Dylan revealed that day, the truth she had pieced together from whispered testimonies and unsent letters, pushed Electra into a corner she could no longer ignore. Whether the confession concerned Luna's final hours or a buried deceit that had poisoned their circle, no one could say. But the look on Electra's face when she finally broke told its own story. Guilt, raw and undeniable. Katie, meanwhile, received an offer that felt like both salvation and temptation. Bill Spencer had been watching from the shadows, his old instincts awakening. The man once known as Dollar Bill, ruthless, brilliant, unapologetically powerful, had tried to soften his edges in recent years, but the facade of civility never quite fit. The chaos surrounding Luna's death, the loss of control at Forrester, and the strain on his family reignited something primal within him. He wanted his empire back, his family united, his name untarnished. Inviting Katie and Will to join Spencer Publications wasn't merely an act of generosity, it was strategy. He knew the power of proximity. If he could bring them back under his roof, perhaps he could rebuild what fame and ambition had eroded. Yet Bill's resurgence came with restraint. The old Bill might have manipulated or coerced, but this time he tread carefully, aware that one wrong move could shatter the fragile peace he had rebuilt with Katie. His invitations were laced with charm, his motives cloaked in nostalgia. He spoke of legacy, of Will's future, of the importance of keeping the Spencer name strong. But deep down, he was fighting his own ghosts, the man he used to be versus the man he still wanted to become. The internal war played out in subtle gestures, the way he lingered over old photos, the hesitation before sending a text, the softening in his voice whenever he said Katie's name. Thanksgiving arrived like a fragile ceasefire amid the turbulence. Il Giardino shimmered with candlelight and music, a sanctuary where love and deceit sat side by side. Sheila Carter Sharp and Deacon Sharp, the couple who once defined chaos, hosted a double date that no one could have imagined a year earlier. Across from them sat Carter Walton and Daphne Rose, their laughter echoing faintly against the hum of the restaurant. For a brief moment, the world seemed kind. Deacon, the eternal optimist despite his past, raised his glass to gratitude. Gratitude for second chances, for survival, for the strange twists that had led him back to Sheila. Sheila, though, remained an enigma even in her contentment. Gratitude did not come naturally to her, but she felt a peculiar softness when she looked at Deacon. Taylor Hayes had once been her unexpected savior, convincing Deacon to return to his wife instead of succumbing to self-destruction. For that, Sheila was thankful, though part of her suspected that Taylor's motives had not been entirely selfless. There was something in the way Taylor looked at Deacon, a wistfulness that spoke of what might have been. Deacon noticed it too, though he never said so aloud. When their eyes met across the table, it was as if time folded in on itself, a brief reminder that even redemption carries a price. Meanwhile, in the Forrester mansion perched high above the Pacific, Taylor joined her daughter Steffi Forrester Finnegan, Finn, and their children for Thanksgiving dinner. The house on the cliff had always been a refuge, its walls holding generations of triumph and heartbreak. The ocean crashed below like an ancient heartbeat, steady and relentless. Taylor tried to lose herself in the warmth of family, in the laughter of her grandchildren, in the gentle domestic rhythm that had eluded her for so long. But when Ridge Forrester arrived, unannounced, uninvited yet inevitable, the air shifted. He was the ghost she could never exorcise, the man who had built her dreams and then shattered them. Seeing him again in the soft evening light, standing with that familiar mix of arrogance and remorse, reopened wounds she thought had finally scarred over. She smiled because she had to, because the children were watching, because Steffi needed her to. Yet inside, she was trembling. Gratitude and grief warred within her as memories of their shared past bled into the present. The house filled with the scent of roasted turkey and pine, but beneath it lingered the faint, bitter perfume of regret. Back in the city, Dylan worked late into the night, poring over files and recordings that no one else dared to touch. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became that Luna's death was not the end of a story, but the beginning of another, one that stretched back months, even years, through layers of deception and misplaced trust. Each discovery drew her deeper into a maze of loyalties, forcing her to question whom she could trust. The faces that smiled at her during the day now appeared in her dreams distorted, whispering half-truths. And always, in the background, there was Luna, the ghost of a girl who had wanted to belong and paid the ultimate price for it. Katie sensed the same unease. Every time her phone buzzed, she half expected another message, another reminder that closure was an illusion. Her instincts as both a mother and a strategist told her that the scandal wasn't over. Someone out there was still manipulating the narrative, still pulling at the threads of her family's pain. Yet she could not decide whether to fight or to flee. Bill's offer loomed in her mind: safety, structure, a return to something familiar. But the part of her that had once loved independence resisted. To return to Spencer Publications would mean stepping back into the orbit of the man who could both save and destroy her with a single word. Deacon and Sheila's night at Il Giardino ended on a deceptively hopeful note. The two couples toasted to forgiveness, but even as they laughed, unspoken thoughts lingered. Deacon's eyes followed Taylor as she left, his heart tugging toward a future that would never be. Sheila, sensing the drift, smiled too brightly, her fingers tightening around her glass. She had fought too hard for the semblance of peace to let it slip away. If Taylor ever tried to cross that invisible line, Sheila knew she would not forgive twice. Thanksgiving might have been about gratitude, but for her, it was also a reminder. Nothing good lasts forever unless you make sure it does. Across town, Finn held his wife close, oblivious to the chain of events quietly gathering momentum beyond their cliffside sanctuary. Ridge lingered after dinner, offering to help clean up, trying to appear like the father and partner he should have been. Taylor watched him from across the room, caught between resentment and tenderness. The light from the fireplace painted his face in flickering amber, softening the edges of the man she once loved beyond reason. When he smiled at her, she almost believed they could start over. But then she remembered every betrayal, every lie, every time he had chosen someone else. The warmth vanished as quickly as it came, leaving only resolve. She would not be the woman waiting in the wings anymore. As night fell over Los Angeles, each character found themselves staring into a mirror of some kind, literal or emotional, confronting the reflection of who they had become. Katie sat by her window, the city lights blurring through unshed tears. Bill stood on his balcony, cigar smoke curling into the darkness as he weighed the cost of being Dollar Bill again. Brooke scrolled through her phone, rereading old messages she would never send. Dylan locked away the evidence she had gathered, knowing that revealing the truth might destroy more than it saved. And at Forrester Creations, the ghost of Luna lingered still, her presence woven into every seam, every design, every whispered apology that came too late. Thanksgiving week ended not with closure, but with anticipation. The rerun scheduled for Thursday felt symbolic, a brief pause before the next act, a reminder that stories on this canvas never truly end. On Friday, when the show returned earlier than usual, viewers would see the same faces but slightly changed, hardened by what they had endured and what they still refused to admit. There would be proposals and confessions, promises and betrayals, because in this world, Love and pain were always intertwined. For now, the streets outside Il Giardino were quiet. The waves below the Forrester cliff whispered against the rocks, and the lights of Los Angeles shimmered like 1,000 unshed tears. Somewhere between grief and gratitude, the families of the bold and the beautiful stood at a crossroads, unaware that their next choices would define not only their futures, but the very legacy they were trying so desperately to.